Hello and welcome. I am Sterling. This is Mark, and we are Road Goes Ever On and On. Today we are looking at Utopia, UK version, Season 2, Episode 3. If you haven't already watched the episode, we highly recommend that you check it out ahead of time. Come right back. We will break it down for you. We'll give you all sorts of great details. But before we do that, we would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. And if you hit that bell icon for notifications, it really does a lot for our channel. So we appreciate it. And without further ado, let's jump in.
Spoilers ahead.
Spoilers! We did talk about some predictions. How did we do on any of those?
We did well. We did not so well. It's a little bit of balance. First prediction I would say was, is this going to be in the past? It was not in the past. We did see that is in fact in current times. We're following the main cast, Becky, Ian, and all of them.
You could say that that's a right and a wrong. So that's one of those situations where you were right and I
Right.
was wrong. So half of us made the correct prediction and the other half made the incorrect prediction, which statistically, with a 50-50 chance and two people and two predictions, I guess really isn't that amazing.
Well, I was kind of hoping I was wrong because I want to see more of the past. I have really enjoyed going back and seeing young Milner, young Philip Carville, and just the story they've been telling in the past with just one episode. So I was really excited to go back to the past. So I was a little disappointed. Do we think that after seeing this episode, do we think we will go back to the past still, or is it
There's got
less
to be
likely?
that Christos scene.
I think
I
so.
I think I think we need that. Possibly where the rock, the gneiss comes from. Possibly something along those lines. But there's definitely more to explore in that, and it seems odd to introduce such compelling characters and just have them be for one episode. So I do think we'll get them at least one more time. If not, I'm still going to stick with my prediction. Obviously, it's not going to be evenly spaced. I'm
Right.
still saying 3 and 3 episodes. So that would mean
Okay.
that we have to end with the present.
Yes, we have to
So
end with the
next two
present.
episodes are going to be in the past. That is my theory. 100% there has to be one of the episodes in the past, but my prediction is two more in the past. What do you think?
I think that the episode 5 will be in the past. I think we'll get one more of kind of what's going on with the gang. Episode 4 will be in the present time. We'll kind of see where these ties are leading. But it's hard to even think that cuz I feel like there's a lot of like open storylines that have a lot of like loose threads that they are going to need to wrap up, and I don't even know if they could do it in 2 episodes of current time. I think they would might maybe need 3 episodes of current time. But I do
Which means, do you think that they were planning on a third season and it never came? Or do you think that we will wrap up at least somewhat nicely? Even if it leaves like one of those kind of ambiguous endings, that was the intention? Or do you think they were planning on something else?
I think we will get a complete ending. I think we will have a satisfying ending with some ambiguous things. I think it will be more satisfying than the first season. I still think we will go back in time, even if it's half an episode. Just even the things with Christos, knowing that, like, where he shows up out of nowhere and he's like, come with me. Like, I feel that is too big of a plot point to not revisit.
I agree. So let's see how else we did on things. Joe, that is Ian's boss. Do you think it is for sure that he is a plant or not?
Well, after seeing that initial scene, I am going to say that I do not think that he is in on the network. I think that he is just a Michael Scott, just trying to be the best boss that he could be. And even then, and in this episode, I feel like he was doing very Michael Scott things of just, hey, what are you doing here? And Very.
Right, right. We'll
Use my
we'll
phone.
come we'll come
We'll come back.
we'll come back to this because this is a good scene, but I just wanted to like briefly hit on some of the so one of the other questions that I had was why do we think that Jessica Hyde is still alive? Like why don't they just kill her?
And we got an
If they
answer.
can get it from her brain, and your theory was maybe they don't know if they can extract it. I think we found out the answer, and it turns out it's a surprising emotional attachment I
Very
did not
surprising.
expect.
Was not expecting that. The whole reason that they kept her alive was because Milner couldn't let her go. Because Milner's love for Carvel just basically, she said, this was the only thing I have left of him. Jessica Hyde is the only thing I have left of him. She has so much love for Philip Carvel that she can't even kill his daughter to get her whole focus on life. She couldn't go through with what she needed to do because of her love for Philip Carvel.
Yeah, that was quite a surprise because it certainly seemed like she was the type of person that was running all the calculations. And if after the calculations it is for the greater good, then whatever the cost, you know? It's it's this reporter, it's this politician's life, it's this, person's life. It is releasing this, this virus that affects this many hundreds of people, whatever it is. If the good outweighs the bad, for the greater good, then that's the cost. And so this was actually kind of a surprising moment to me. And
Same.
I felt like one of the things that helped me to better believe it, because that could feel like a 180, was actually seeing a physical form of her attachment. The fact that she still had that same rock, that nice, that both Jessica Hyde and Arby had was like that is proof that she's literally holding on to something from the past. Quite
Yes.
literally
Literally.
after all this time.
Literally holding on to something from the past.
So
Okay.
I think we're right about one thing. Is Anton Philip Carvel?
And I think that that is basically confirmed. There could be a rug pull later that it's not him.
Yes. That's
However,
exactly how I feel. It's like 95%.
and I funny thing, we talked about if he was speaking German, and I don't know if you noticed there was that one guy that said "Sprechende Deutsch," and he just blank faced at him, and I was like, okay. And then hearing him talk later when he was like, whatever he was saying in the other language, it did sound a little bit more Russian, which also still leads me to believe that it is in fact Carvel. We saw that Becky and Ian found the drawings that looked pretty much the same drawings as in Utopia. They still have Utopia. I don't know which one of
Right.
them had it, but one of them has been carrying around Utopia, and they compared the drawings of the scientist, and it is pretty spot on. And they were like, oh, well, maybe he got these from somewhere. And they even kind of confirmed, they said, he drew these. He drew one of Grant, he drew one of this. Like,
Yeah.
he is the one drawing these.
I will say as a criticism, and maybe this is somebody who is one of those people that I hate it, like dog earing a book in order to keep a
Oh, yeah.
page. That's what bookmarks were invented for. I don't like it when people bend my cards in board games. I've started sleeving some of them. I am a little bit on the ridiculous side. I know that not everybody is like this. So one piece of complaint that I had was when they were looking at the manuscript versus his drawings. It's outside in the rain. And and there was part of me that wanted to scream at them and be like, "Get in the car!"
Those are original Carvel paintings.
I was like,
You are just destroying them.
"Do you know what this is doing to their street value?"
And I didn't even notice that. Like, I did notice the rain. I noticed they were talking in the rain, and it didn't even cross my mind. But I would have been livid if I had any comic book out in the rain at that time, or any book in general, and they just had it so willy-nilly, and all these pictures and his pictures that he's just drawing, that if it gets wet it's gonna bleed, things are gonna get all over the paper. Not the smartest.
Right. I mean, unless it's egregious, I'm not generally going to say something. Instead, I'll
Right.
just kind of like eagle eye watch. But I'm one of those people that it's like you see somebody go for the greasy food that you have like the picks for so that they don't have to touch it. And you just, all I can do is watch their fingertips from that point on, as it's like, what are they going to touch next? Like, just don't touch anything on the game. Don't use a napkin. And I have these issues. I'm sorry about it. But
That's
that is all
hilarious.
I could kind of focus on at that point, was like, just, you can't do this in the rain. This is unacceptable.
There's a time and a place. You have a great car, get in the car.
Right. Right. So Philip Carvel is, we're Anton, we like 95% think that Anton is Philip Carvel. So how do we feel about some of the ongoing predictions? So I think one of them is Wilson Wilson. Is he the next Mr. Rabbit? Do we believe this still? And if so, why? Do we not believe this still? And if so, why?
I still believe it. I I wrestled with it in this episode, specifically with his interactions with Lee. You can tell he has a lot of animosity towards Lee based on him pulling out his eye, and he basically paralyzed Lee, gave him the half paralysis, shot him in the lung. And I feel like this episode showed a great amount of Wilson, wanting to save his friends, wanting to kind of kill Lee. I say kind of because he did hesitate. Like, he had him, he could have done it, but he still didn't. And the one thing,
I don't think he wanted to. I think he was threatening Lee, hoping that Lee would do what he wanted, because I think Lee was 100% right about who he is.
there's one line that makes me still think that he is Mr. Rabbit, going to be the next Mr. Rabbit. And it's what Milner says to him. Because
Mm, for me, it was what Lee said to him. So I'm curious.
he was like, when she first gave him Lee, and she's like, you guys are working together, figure it out, you'll whatever. And this is when I first saw Wilson put up the argument like, no, he took out my eye, I will not be with him, they're my friends, I can't hurt my friends. Like, he was adamant. And this is what Milner said: I didn't choose to become Mr. Rabbit.
Yes.
That
You
is
know
my
what? You know what Lee said that made me think it.
what?
He's
I
threatening
know
Lee with a
exactly what you're
gun.
saying. Yep.
Yes, it is so good. Lee just calls him out, and he says, "I think you could kill. I think you could kill millions, but it has to be relevant, or there has to be a reason. Like, I don't remember exactly what it was,
It
but
has to be a
something
worthy
along the
cause, I believe, is what he said.
and then he was like, and I'm not a worthy cause or something like that.
Something
So it's
like that,
like
yeah.
it was basically saying like there has to be a good reason, and just killing for revenge, not a good reason. So he can hold the gun there all that time. That's why Lee just casually walks away from him
He
while the gun is
pulls
being pointed at him,
pulls out a
casually,
cross
opens up the
crowbar.
trunk, casually opens a crowbar. So he's making, and then he has to walk that whole distance, which Wilson can shoot him at any point. That is ballsy.
I thought this scene was
That is
great
so ballsy.
because he even winds up like he's gonna hit him. And like they're like lowering themselves, like he's like, I'm gonna hit you in the leg. Like, he's like crouching down, like, I'm about to hit you in the leg, like this is gonna happen. Like, he gave him so many opportunities to pull that trigger, and
Yep.
he ended up not doing it. Quick question on this. So you do think that he still will be Mr. Rabbit?
I do think so because, like you said, Milner said, "I didn't choose this." It does feel like it's being forced on Wilson Wilson. Um, and then Lee calls him out as being somebody who is willing to do things for the bigger picture, regardless of how like it, killing isn't the issue. It's doing the right thing for society, I guess, you know?
So
So
quick
what's your question?
quick question. So with Milner, she said she didn't choose to be Mr. Rabbit, meaning like, and this is almost why I feel like we do need another past episode, because how did she become Mr. Rabbit? What was that leading event that got her there? Was it part of that, that we see that one girl, I forget her name. I think it's like maybe Leah or something, the short
Oh,
bob.
in the current episode with the
Yeah, yeah.
red outfit, Leah.
Yes.
Yes, it is Leah.
So Leah, she has that short. She seemed more in charge of Milner. Like Milner has always seemed like the top. Mr. Rabbit was the top, but now I'm kind of, as I was watching their interactions, and we go back to we talked about the color a little bit. In this episode, Milner was only wearing blue, and Leah was only
Yeah,
wearing red the whole time.
and they were framed hard with yellow.
Yes. Which, fun fact, same house that they were in the past. I don't know if you noticed that, but that is the
No, I
exact
didn't.
same house that they were in the past, which was a different house in the last season when Milner showed her son. Fun fact.
Damn. So the read I got on it was not necessarily that this was that they keep having a new person you don't know about who's like an even bigger boss than the last boss. The read I got on it was there's a lot of people involved with this, and there are some very significant stakeholders that have, a significant literal like monetary stake or something along those lines, in this work and the effect of it. And while for the most part she's probably been leading it and doing a great job, the past 5 months, I don't remember exactly how long it is. However long it's been, I think I pulled out a wrong number. However long it's been since Jessica Hyde has been captured,
I can't remember.
maybe 5 weeks.
No, I think it's
Um,
been months. It's
it
definitely been a long time.
it's been an unacceptable amount of time
Right.
for what they need to get done. They're coming hard against their deadlines, and the
Right.
one blocker is Milner at this point. So it's we can't go the nice route anymore. You need to kill Jessica Hyde
Right.
because we can get the information from her brain. We need to move forward. If we this vaccine is coming out at this point, like we've said it.
V-Day.
We need to produce that. That takes work to do it. So we need to know what's in her head so that we can make any, appropriate modifications
Right.
and then move forward with it. We can't be nice anymore. So this felt like just somebody who's invested enough time, effort, and literally money that they now have the weight of being able to say you're not working in the best interest of all of us, and I have enough weight to be able to say you gotta, you know, put up or shut up at this point.
Right.
That's
That's
I could see either argument, but
no,
that's how I kind of felt on that one.
I kind of pondered it where I was like, I didn't think that she was bigger. Like I didn't necessarily think she was above Mr. Rabbit because we've all heard that Mr. Rabbit's the top. It was more of, I do see her more of as like a stockholder in the network, and she's like, this is what we want to see continue, you know? And it was just that one question of, I didn't want to be Mr. Rabbit. And this woman may even seem a little bit younger than Milner. Milner has a little bit more wrinkles than her. I don't know if she's younger or older. And so I had that thought of like, is there a whole part of the network that made Mr. Rabbit the front man of the network and everybody is chasing Mr. Rabbit?
So you got me on some really good creative areas with like a keyword you kind of said. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
You think, and I agree with you, that Wilson's going to be the next Mr. Rabbit. We don't have a lot of time to see him ascend to that throne. And so, do we have time to both see him ascend to that throne and see him get taken down? Or is there the possibility that the conclusion of this is a little bit on the ambiguous side? And it's like, just as they take down the main antagonist, that's when we see a new person step into that role. And that's where it's kind of left off of, did they really solve the problem? Or is it possible that people like this will always continue to think of what is the best for, the majority, and there's always going to be people that will step into this role of being willing to do bad for the greater good.
I think that it will end with Wilson becoming the next Mr. Rabbit. Like, I don't think we're going to see him be Mr. Rabbit. I don't think we're going to see any actions that he takes as Mr. Rabbit. I think it's just going to be Milner is probably killed, towards the end. We see that she has this reasoning for everything she did. We kind of get her backstory, how she became Mr. Rabbit, and it all ties in together with Miss Wilson being the next Mr. Rabbit.
That's kind of what I'm thinking at this point, is that it's they're not necessarily going to completely wrap it up in a bow, but they'll leave a few threads hanging purposefully, but still close the series.
I definitely agree with that.
So with what we predicted in the past being confirmed or being proven false, or we're kind of talking about what we think about what's coming up, let's get into the intro of this. What did you think about the opening of this show?
So I loved it, of course, because I feel like every opening that they have these gorgeous shots. These sometimes contrasting colors, sometimes they're showing things. We saw in the very first shot, we see a field, we see a blue sky, a windmill. The right next shot, we see another field, but it's more yellow and blue. So yellow is the field, blue is the sky, and I feel that first establishing shot was perfect in going into the first scene with Lee and the bumbling manager, because Lee was wearing yellow and the manager was wearing blue.
There is another reason why this was brilliant.
Oh.
I love the fact that this is a show about detail, that some shows will just like make up crap as it goes along, and it doesn't really matter. There was a minor detail in the last episode that I mentioned you didn't notice that had payoff in this. So Joe, the manager, right before Ian asks him if he wants to go for a drink, Joe's dressed up in his biking outfit.
Yes.
Right? He's ready to leave the office. So we know that Joe is a biker.
Right.
That is a piece of throwaway information that doesn't mean anything. Or is it something that they did a good job of saying, hey, let's think about this ahead of time so we can have some good payoff? And in this case, if you think about that opening shot, there's a road in the background and there is a cyclist. And the next
saw
shot,
him.
we see another cyclist. And then why is there anybody in the office that early? The only reason that somebody would come to the office that early is because he's a cyclist, he's wearing his full cyclist get up, he has his dry cleaning ready, he probably has to like freshen up and then change out of his clothes and like get into the whole business outfit. So Lee thinks, I'm here early. Like,
Nobody will
Nobody's
be
going to be
here.
here before 8. We're good. Maybe somebody will be here at 7:30. I'll come here at and the first shot we saw was like sunrise. We literally saw like the sun.
Yes.
So he's cycling first thing in the morning to get there. And that's why Lee is surprised because there's this
Wow.
one guy who cycles to work and has to have time to
Wow.
get ready from that.
I missed the cyclist in the beginning. Like I know that he cycled to work and I saw that and the only thing I had noticed was the the shot right before he got there was very blue sky, very yellow field, and then he gets in there, he's wearing blue, Lee's wearing yellow to show that very
Yeah,
man, this is
there's
this
there's
is why the show is
another
good.
brilliant. Absolutely. Another bit of brilliant payoff, not related to the scene you're about to talk about, but I still want to bring it up and then we'll kind of talk about the implication of the end of it later on. If you look at the weather in the scenes, it gets increasingly worse. So
Yes.
that first scene where the sun is coming up, the clouds are wisp. They're not like the fluffy clouds. They're like the really thin wisps, and they're
Mhm.
pretty spread out. We see a windmill, which means we know how much wind it is, and it's moving very slowly. The second scene, he's gotten much closer to work, and that wheat is blowing pretty hard. So it's like we have more wind, and we see like fluffier clouds in the sky, not like the really
Oh.
wispy clouds. And the further we go throughout this episode, the more clouds we get, the bigger they get, the grayer the sky gets, we're definitely moving towards a storm.
Yes. And there
And
is
it does a
it does a payoff of a storm later and they had the drawings out in the storm. Why? You know,
why?
the other thing about I I was looking at that windmill, right? There's
Yeah.
that windmill in the first scene. There is one other time we see windmills, and there's two of them. And it's the scene with Lee and Wilson when they are having that confrontation with the crowbar and he's ready to shoot him. There's two windmills. And I'm wondering if the windmills represent the going green of trying to get rid of people to keep the earth safe. And in that second shot with Wilson and Lee, there's two windmills showing that both of them are trying to, or both of them have that same idea of wanting to save the planet in mind, and that's why we saw the two windmills. That's the only thing I noticed from that. I can't pick it apart farther than that. That's all I got. The one really cool thing that I liked was the end of that scene of Lee and the manager when he's
Let's
talking.
jump in.
Yeah, he's talking on the phone, and I thought this was so unexpected because right after this scene, we go into a recap of the previous episode. And what he's talking on the phone and he's like, we gotta clean this up. I need, we gotta make this death look real. And they're talking, he's like, I don't know if we can do suicide. And after he hit him on the head, he says, we definitely can't do suicide. The scene cuts to Becky about to commit suicide from the previous episode.
Ooh.
And I thought that
Oh, I really like those kind of like mirrors, bookends.
there was one other time I had noticed that pretty early on in the episode, but that one was the first one where she said he was like, let's he's like, we definitely can't do suicide. Boom, Becky's about to jump off. And I thought that that was so cool because it was a recap that we cut to and we saw that it connected to that. And I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but
No, I
then
don't think so.
I don't think
Did
so
did you
either.
ever did you ever read The Watchmen?
I read parts of it and a long time ago. So I think I read
So
the
the
first half.
the Watchmen has a lot of that where if you look at how one scene ends and how another scene begins, that they'll
Yes.
oftentimes, kind of be similar. So it's like they're mirroring each other. And there's some kind of meaning in that. And you can really it makes certain things more impactful.
Yeah, so the other one I saw was when they are at that house where they're kind of all hiding out, the gang, so like Becky, Ian, Arby, Grant, and they're all there, and Arby says, "Let's get this place cleaned up." And it cuts to a dish being cleaned. And Becky's cleaning the dishes, and so I get it, like, let's get this place cleaned up. Like, they don't really need to show us any cleaning happening. They can just cut to the next scene, but they cut to cleaning.
Right. I thought one of the interesting things about, so I definitely didn't pick up on that. And once again, like I love those kind of mirroring parts. For me, so shortly after that, she pulls out her hands out of the water and she sees them covered in blood. And this to me reminded me very much of Macbeth. So
Oh.
the Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have just killed the king, and the act is weighing on them, and it's causing them to lose sleep, or when they do sleep they have nightmares, and it really ends up kind of, that guilt really builds to a few pivotal moments. So for me, my question, and maybe I should have asked the question instead of putting my kind of perspective on this. Do you think that this is a bout of deals that is, kind of progressing and causing her to, let's say, like hallucinate? Or do you think that this is guilt that she is having? And if you think it's a guilt, what do you think that is causing her to really be this guilty about?
That so I do I At first I did think it was Deals. I was like, "Oh, maybe she's having a Deals episode." I would say that nothing that we've seen before makes me believe it was Deals. Like, I don't feel like any of the symptoms that I've seen of Deals is that.
Yeah.
I am thinking that, and I'm maybe we'll get more of it, or maybe they'll tease us like they did before. We did confirmation of the first season. We kind of knew Becky was working with, yep,
Don Christian Donaldson, yep.
and your theory was like, what is Becky doing? And we did get a full come clean that she was trying the whole time from the beginning, trying to get Utopia to Donaldson. And so
Right.
that was a full confirmation there that that was the intention, that was her goal. I'm thinking, maybe we'll see. We won't get like a payoff to this because we don't get a next season of the blood on her hands. But I think it has to do with what Donaldson has made her do to get the medicine of of helping Deals. That's what I think
Yeah.
it is. I think that she, like the way they were threatening that one guy, I feel like there has probably been a time where Becky has probably done some not so favorable things, and that is why she sees her hands covered in blood.
Yeah. I was going kind of two different ways, and I still don't know where I am on this. So the first way I went to is kind of like what you're saying. Donaldson has been holding this, the solution to deals, which is very temporary. You have to keep taking it.
Right.
He's been holding this over her head and causing her to do some things that she greatly regrets. And so maybe we'll have, a little bit of, we'll see a prior scene of some horrible thing she's done. But then I was also thinking, is it possible that there's something we've already seen? And I wonder if she's been in league with Christian Donaldson long enough that to some extent the death of Wilson's family is, she has some fault.
Oh.
Like she's been, because somebody did make the call that they've found or like the text that they found that got them in there. And I think it might have been her. Like she might have been the reason that they found that bunker. And so I'm wondering if she really feels like the
Hmm.
actions that I took, like it's their blood that's on my hands. And that if that's the case, that's all the way back to season
Season
one,
one.
episode one.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Huh. Because we did see her early on in the first season calling Donaldson.
I
We
think it was
know,
like episode two or three that we finally saw that phone call, and it was like, oh no, what's she doing?
yeah. And, you know, Becky's family was never hurt or anything. Like, how far. And we did get a confirmation in this episode that a long time ago, even seeming before Utopia season one, that she and Donaldson hooked up. So there is this history with them, and he was part of the network in a way. I think he
He
was.
was. I think he was because he specifically said that the person he reached out to was used to be in the network,
Right.
but it's okay. That person was drunk. They wouldn't have, and it's like, well, that person's dead.
Yeah.
Uh, like so I think he at least was part of the network or is like, one of like the edge network nodes,
Hmm.
not commonly used, whatever. He's has some connection to the network.
Yeah. And I mean, we definitely saw that when Dugdale was going to him about the vaccine in the beginning. He was trying to tried to shoo Dugdale off, take the
Right.
information and go, and then Dugdale took the folder. So I do, but clearly the network has changed their views of Donaldson and are back at trying to kill him. So
Right.
when they're at that house, there is a lot of dolls. A lot of
A lot.
dolls. Like, too many dolls. I don't know whose house this is. I don't know where they are. Are these dolls symbolic of two things? Either the network looking at them, looking for them, like all eyes on them, or is it all of humanity? Like, this is humanity's last hope for
Oh.
Janus, and all of humanity is eyes on them. What are you guys gonna do next? I don't know. I didn't see too much about the dolls. I did see there was one rabbit on the TV when they watched the TV when Ian was getting blamed for killing his boss, which we know was Lee,
Yeah.
which was another callback of faking CCTV footage.
Right.
That I thought that was pretty neat.
It really was. That's an interesting kind of theory. I feel like this show doesn't generally put a bunch of detailed things in the shot without it having some significance.
Right.
So I do think that there is that the dolls are somehow a metaphor. It's not just because they're in somebody's home. They could have been in any of the rooms. They could have been in the master
Right.
bedroom instead of like this children's room. So there was no need for the dolls to be there. And we've seen how much detail they can pack into a single shot when we were talking about like the, you know, three intro scenes that happen over probably less than 30 seconds,
Oh yeah.
of giving you information about the weather, giving you beautiful visuals, and giving you information about this cyclist who is somebody we know. They pack in information, right?
Right.
I think I think there is some symbolism. I don't know what that means. I think that might be one of those like loose symbolisms where, it implies something and it's kind of up to the audience to take what they want from it. I like I like the idea of like the world is watching or waiting on them. The people are
Or it could be like from the US version, you know how Wilson Wilson goes on that rant about tchotchkes and knickknacks, consumerism. Is it saying that this house is full of people, like dolls, which are little people? It's so crowded with these little people because it wasn't just one room, it was every room had all these dolls. There was the living room, the room they were
I
sleeping
didn't
in.
see that.
It was every room had these dolls. The room where they were like all sleeping first, then they went to the TV room. There was a bunch of dolls in there. There were a couple rooms that had all these dolls. So is it saying that there's too many people packed into this house, which is Earth?
That's kind of one of the cool things is that they give you enough visual, and there is some, and it's not just like random, like they
Mm-hmm.
choose the things that are in there enough so that you can kind of run from there and take it one way or another. So to some extent, I would put this with, art where it is subjective.
Yes.
They have created it. They might have a point for it, but in the end, it is the viewer that looks at it, that interprets it and says, "Do I like it? Do I not? What do I think of it?" And we can actually put on it things that the artist never intended, and that is valid.
Yeah. I agree.
So
And honestly, that's why I love this show because I do feel like they add those little things, these little details that don't necessarily need to, like, they could have just been in a normal house with no tchotchkes, no
right,
dolls, no anything, but they chose to have those dolls there, and it was a lot
yeah,
of them.
yeah, that's a very specific, very very specific choice. That's a good catch. I definitely like that. So I think we kind of touched on color a little bit. I don't know if you have any interest in going. I am actually interested in going a little bit because we like
Please do.
brushed on it,
Yeah, please do.
and I'm not gonna go super deep, but I did think it was a in. No, actually, you did say this.
Which one?
That's fine. I'm just gonna re-say it because I thought it was
Say it.
interesting. Leah, all red, like
Mm,
solid,
yes.
solid red. Milner, I think, was in solid blue.
All blue this episode.
All blue. There's no questions of like, oh, there's hints of this color or the shirt is that, but the jacket is brown. This was blue and red and like those yellow curtains, or there was like another yellow
Yep, yep.
backdrop. The different times it was like I if anybody has any theories on what these colors mean, I'd love to see them in the comments, especially yellow. Like what is the significance? Because we've seen that in a couple of different places, and
Yeah.
and maybe that just comes down to colors that pop and it gives contrast to the different characters, so you can easily pick them apart. Like, do you think that this is a choice where there is significance, or do you think that this is just a visual, stylistic choice? What do you think this means? Leave it in the comments. I'm kind of curious to
Yeah.
see what other people kind of think about this. Speaking of colors, did you notice? And I don't want to take any credit for
Oh
this.
yeah.
100% my wife, Dawn Watts. I have to give her all the credits. I kind of picked up on this a little bit. Did you notice the way that they do contrast in this, in particular saturation, and what were kind of, did you have any thoughts on saturation in this?
I mean, we saw in the first episode that it was very like grainy sepia, like when they were back in the past. I feel like when they have certain contrasts, it's for certain areas. So like when Jessica Hyde was in the, like when they were going to operate on her, pull out her brains and get all that, it was very white in there. Everything was very sterile. The everything seemed so like muted. Like it was like nothing stood out. Like if you look at most of the show with colors here and there, with Milner and Leah, they were very red and blue, very distinct. And in that operating room, which is very sterile, There's nothing in there. It was very white. There was there was absence of color in there. I don't know if that's exactly what you're pointing out, so I would love to hear what you're talking about.
So what she pointed out, and I'm obviously she's not here, so I'm paraphrasing. Very much reminded me after she pointed out. Do you remember the early days of IG with saturation, where some of the filters allowed you to like crank saturation up to 11,
Yes.
and it led to weird ass artifacting in your images. Especially in the edges where you go from one color to another color, there would be some really weird artifacts that happen.
Yes.
This show ranks up the saturation not to 11. It's not old days of Instagram. I do think I would argue with her that it is oversaturation though, to the point where there is artifacting when you do look closely at edges, especially if there's a strong contrast between the two colors. There's like weird, weird things that go on. And she noticed it before a specific scene, but uh, a scene that she also mentioned for a different reason, which I think also comes down to saturation, is we noticed not great quality in the rain scene.
I did
And
notice that. Yes.
I think this comes down to the combination of oversaturation creating this distortion of colors that creates even more information that they have to display from shot to shot, and that constantly change because like raindrops create more distortion.
Right.
So it's like raindrops distort things, oversaturating distorts things, and so it leads to like a double kind of distortion effect that's constantly happening that I think has a negative effect. And so I think that I have enjoyed the visuals. I never put my thumb on like oversaturation, but there was definitely one scene where I remembered, I think it was at nighttime, where the grass was like bright green.
I
And it was just
noticed
kind of weird.
the first season.
I don't remember, but it was weird how bright it was
It
for
was
how.
the when they zoomed in on the abandoned house that they were in. They were doing some shots of it, and it showed the house. And I remember that green, and I thought this almost doesn't look like it belongs in this episode. Like it doesn't. It feels like it's out of place a little bit.
Because it was nighttime and it was like the green
Yes.
popped so bright. I do think that they made a stylistic choice to like really crank up contrast and saturation in order to really make these really cool colors. I think it's really paid off in some scenes.
Oh yeah.
I think it's been detrimental in some scenes.
That's very
So
fair.
I think it might have been a better choice to dial it back a little bit and have everything be high quality than do that so that like these some scenes that just hit you, they're like, oh my God, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. You if everything isn't of that quality, you don't come away thinking that this is amazing.
Right.
So in the end, that this scene here is lowering this scene. So
That's
I
fair.
think they should have dialed back. I think I've got to give my wife Dawn all of the credit on that.
My wife.
My wife.
My wife.
So we briefly mentioned this, and so I want to kind of
Well,
come
wait,
back to
wait.
it, which
Before
is
before we leave color, there is one thing I want to talk about it real quick. So
please.
we have noticed that Jessica Hyde has been very closely associated with yellow. We we saw her in the yellow cage, and there was this one scene. Like every time she's been in prison, she's had yellow bars. When they were taking her to the be operated on, there were small specks of yellow. That was the only color that was there, and it was very like
Ooh.
small framed ones. Then when she finally escapes, and she's in the biohazard thing, there is in the truck. It is a yellow cage one more time, and she gets out of a red bin when she finally escapes. Now, Arby has been carrying a yellow bag this whole time, which in the first season was not good. The yellow bag was bad. And this season, I we'll get to Arby and theories about Arby in a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
but he has been carrying the yellow bag, which makes me think positively of him. And Lee, the I would say probably the big antagonist of this season. He is very much like the Arby of last season. Lee has been wearing a yellow green suit. So like it's not as bright as yellow as what Jessica Hyde's been portrayed as, and it's not as yellow as Arby's bag, and even Lee had a green bag, but his suit is not quite green either. Like we've seen really green greens. It is a almost yellow green. And it's kind of like if yellow is the sign of Jessica Hyde being the savior, this godlike figure, if yellow is attributed to that at all, then maybe Lee and his distorted green yellow is a sign of he's been tainted in a way.
Damn.
I wanted to get that out there. I did see her jump out of the yellow cage in out of the red biohazard thing, and I was just like, great payoff for me. I've been watching these colors. Great payoff for me.
You had a detail in a bar scene that you wanted to bring up. I know this is a crazy transition,
Nope, it's a perfect
but
transition.
I'm curious, what was the crazy detail?
So we see Jeff going to talk to Leah at this bar,
Yep.
at this pub where we've seen pubs in the show have been a scene of like introductions, getting to know people. That was, maybe Jeff getting to know her. In that pub slash bar,
In the pub
there
slash
were,
bar.
yeah.
No,
Well,
I
UK is a
don't I
pub.
don't know if they have bars in the UK. So
It's a
we'll
pub.
call it
It's a pub.
just a pub.
Just a
It's a
pub.
pub, bub.
Pub bub. Don't call me bub. Anyway,
Don't call me bub.
ev-
Chic.
everybody in there that wasn't Leah and Jeff were
Yes.
all wearing lab coats that looked like they were
Lab coats.
covered in blood, and none of them were sitting together.
None of them
But
were
everyone had
sitting.
him on there. What is the significance of that pub? What is it?
Interesting. Do you think it could have anything to do with my segue?
That
Whoop.
they're the doctors that are on their payroll?
So, we were just talking about Jessica Hyde escaping. How did she escape?
She Oh, she went into the biohazard.
Through a super gross chute. When the chute was opened, we saw blood, guts, excrement just piled up. And it wasn't congealed. This is current. This is like this day, probably. The people that were working in this place that took her in were wearing lab coats. They're doing, scientific-y stuff. They are deal. So the way that I look at this isn't a one-off. She's not the only person in there. I don't know what the heck they're doing with any of these other people's animals, but like they are definitely living, bleeding things because there was a lot of
Lot of blood.
blood and guts and excrement. This is not a normal hospital with the amount of blood that was on those lab coats, with the amount of blood that was in that chute. They're I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing some stuff.
So, my
And
question,
this pub is I don't think it's the local watering hole. I don't think that this is acceptable, like accessible
okay.
to anybody in the neighborhood. I think this is like an on campus. This is, like closed security. They've got, fence guard, all that stuff. You can't get into this complex. But because they're, constantly dismembering animal people, whatever, they've got a little place for them to escape afterwards and relax and be able to openly talk about whatever horrible things that they have planned for humanity that in the end may be, good for everybody.
Two questions. Do you think we'll get a payoff to that pub of like
I hope so.
I kind of hope so. I was like, there is no way we're going to this pub and everybody's wearing this bloody coat and we never talk about it again.
Right.
That struck me as very like we got to see this. There's got to be a payoff for this. My second question is how come none of these guys go into this pub, take off their coat that's covered in blood, and just go in with their normal clothes on? And like, this is a coat that they have on. You could take your coat off, have your normal shirt on, and enjoy a pint. Why are you wearing a bloody lab coat while you're enjoying a pint?
And or why don't they have they obviously cater to this clientele. Why don't they have a coat rack?
Yeah,
You
hang
don't
up
you
your
don't have to
bloody.
leave it in the car, like getting blood on the seat. You can hang it on the bloody coat rack. Make sure you've got a name tag so you know which coat is yours, and maybe you have your name embroidered on the inside. I don't care how you differentiate your white lab coat to everybody else's, but yes, why are you wearing your bloody lab coat? I think it was so this is a little bit silly. I think it
Okay,
does, like help this scene. You spend a little too much time picking it apart. It's like,
that's what I did.
why? Why are you wearing? I mean, this is like, having the comic out in the rain. It's like, don't pick it apart too much. But I
And
did, but you did, and we're gonna do it.
also, speaking about picking apart too much, there's a scene where Milner talks about she's trying to kind of like find where Ian, Becky, and them all are, right? And nonchalantly, while they're at the dollhouse, the creepy dollhouse, Grant just pulls out his phone. He's like, "I googled it. Why aren't they tracking Grant's phone?" That's nitpicking. I'm sorry, but I thought
That's
about that. I was like, "Wait, he was on his
it's
phone. He googled it."
no, that's fine. I think for a good amount of time, anybody that's watched all of our content will know that we, for season one, we did the U.S. versus the UK. We did this whole compare and contrast, and I think our overall thought was the UK did it a lot better. And so I don't think we really talked about whether or not the UK's shit stunk or not, because compared to the US, it was this amazing
Gold
show.
platter.
I think seeing it stand on its own, I do think that we are starting to see some weaknesses
Yes.
of, like the, oversaturation of some kind of silly plot points where that seemed like it was amazing compared to the US, but
Right.
now we're watching it on its own and is it is it perfect? No, it's extremely good. I really like it. Really like some of its touches.
Agreed.
It is not perfect,
No.
and some of those flaws do show.
I do think they are telling a very good story. I think that's a masterful story that is being told. The way they are telling it with certain imagery, the different colors. I do the cyclist thing. I didn't even notice that. That has just blown my mind today because I remember seeing the cyclist like in those opening shots, but I didn't put the two and two together. So I do think overall what they are doing is really well done, but there are a couple flaws. But I feel like everything is going to have flaws, and with us two detective sleuths on the case, we're gonna we're gonna find all the good stuff and also find all the not so good stuff.
Something else that can be, and this is probably far too late to be doing this, is like season two, episode three, but something that can be tough for American audiences is different British accents, and this show has a variety of them.
Oh yeah,
Becky has the Liverpool accent, which is pretty thick.
yeah.
Dugdale has, I think, the Scottish accent. So they've got
Oh
this
yeah, yeah.
like this whole mix of accents, and it can be tough enough to understand one locality, but at least if you have one, you feel like, okay, just give me a little bit of time and I'll figure this one out. But then each character is from a different part of England, and each one of them has a different accent. And for some people, honestly, that can be very tough, and that is an instant. If you can't understand the TV you're watching,
Right, right. And also,
that's a turn off.
in British television, they will also use words that most U.S. audiences don't know, and so I think they called them Dodger or Dodger or something. Yeah, I could, back when I first started watching British television, that was a little bit of a hard barrier to get over. But now that I have watched it, I'm so used to it, it doesn't bother me. And actually, I love British television. It's great.
I grew up on it, so I
I
love
know
it.
you did.
I've got a soft spot. I grew up with Doctor Who. I
Who?
watched a bunch of Doctor Who,
Who?
Red Dwarf, a bunch of other stuff. I could go into a whole list, but then we would just have a list of things that I've seen. So for me, I'm okay with it.
I have a question for you.
I have an answer or not.
Do you think Jessica Hyde fancies Ian? Are we gonna see a love
I
triangle?
Oh, we were man, I meant to hit on this millennia ago when we were talking about open theories we had and whether or not we
Yes.
still felt like there was payoff. So here's the open theory. Sorry, I will get to your answer,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I first have to ask my own question first. I'm sorry, meant
No.
to do this a long time ago. Jessica Hyde, do we still think that she will become a mother potentially because there's this back door built into Janus?
I think we have that potential to see that. I I was trying to think who would that be, and I feel like there is a particular part in this episode that made me think that it might be Ian.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking. She she gets out of that vehicle, like the hazmat truck. She has to wash all of the like
Disgusting.
excrement, blood, guts.
So
It is
gross. That
disgusting.
is the worst scene.
Then there's kind of, for the UK, I would say this is one of the more awkward scenes, but it still has good reason. It wasn't like the US ones where they would have just an uncomfortable scene. You're like, oh, why am I watching this? She's watching this couple making out, and they're making out pretty hard. The girl's skirt is pretty high up. You see a lot of leg grinding, and we even see Jessica Hyde kind of moving her tongue around, like maybe she's picturing herself French
Right.
kissing, you know. Um, and then it turns out she steals the bag from them so that she can have clothes and wear normal clothes. And as she's looking at the clothes she got, she sees the picture of Ian and kind of like this is it a little bit.
Well, and
I do think,
she's also sitting at a plate later. She's when she's looking at the picture, she's sitting on a swing at a playground, looking at all the children longingly while she's looking at a
yes,
picture with of Ian.
yes. So first she's looking at a couple being able to have an intimate moment, and you're seeing her thinking of having that intimate moment herself. Then you see her, yes, looking at a picture of Ian longingly and potentially looking at what the effect of having that relationship with Ian would be because she's at a park with children and she does smile. It does seem like we see the children first, we see her smile, and then we see Ian, we see her smile. And so it's a little bit ambiguous. It could be all along
Right.
like the picture of Ian that made her smile and not the thought of kids with Ian, but there are definitely dots that you can definitely connect. Maybe it paints that picture, maybe it doesn't. I do think that I I don't know how it's gonna go. I mean, Becky's making some pretty big mistakes that is making Ian
Oh,
start to not trust her. So I
yes.
could see a pivot away from Becky, from Ian to Jessica Hyde. I
They
can see
did
that.
they did technically set this up in the first season when they're first kind of getting together. They tore off Becky and Ian were first getting together. They tore off all their clothes. They kind of had a little thing. They go into hiding, and Jessica Hyde splits them up and says, "Ian's coming with me." And Becky gets a little bit jealous, and it creates that little rift between them. Jessica Hyde never really showed interest in Ian. I would say that Jessica Hyde and Ian were probably the closest in the first season. Of Jessica Hyde being close to any of them, she talked to him the most and had more of a rapport with him. So I feel like they have kind of sowed the seed that
We
Ian
we
and
do also see Jessica Hyde forcing Ian to kiss her at gunpoint.
right. After she's making fun of him for all the little dates and things that he's doing with Becky, and then he forces her to kiss, which almost kind of like when she's making that tongue movement, like she's trying to figure out how to kiss. What we already saw her kiss though, so she already knows how to do that, I guess.
I think she's like reliving it. I don't think she's practicing.
Oh, yeah, that probably makes
Otherwise,
more
she would have
sense.
like used a hand, like made a hole to try, you know,
Here's actual
like
footage
I.
of when I learned how to kiss. But then we do see
um.
Becky and Ian. So Ian calls her out on her bullshit, and it was just like, I missed you. I was looking
Oh
for
yeah.
you. I was crazy about you. And you look at me and you say, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And they kind of like make up a little bit.
You know, I can't tell. So I have mixed thoughts on this. I have very mixed emotions on this. So one side of it is she she does feel bad. She's been in this awkward position, and she does kind of apologize for it, but she is kind of good. There's another side where I see her possibly being a little manipulative, and when she wants Ian to agree with her, and she says, "Don't call Milner," which is a little bit selfish because it's like she has her ulterior motives with, Donaldson because he has what can save her life. When she asks Ian for that favor, she that's when she officially apologizes. You can see like Ian's
Oh.
kind of leaning towards her, and then she's like, you know, I don't remember exactly what she said, but it's like, I do feel bad about that. I am sorry. It's like
Well,
it's
she
at
says
that
it,
moment.
she did say that getting on the train was like one of the worst mistakes that she made.
Yes, she waited until that moment to apologize, until like the moment that she needs something. So it's like on some end it seems like it could be manipulative. On the other end, I could see the whole she's, if we go back to like the blood on the hands, um, Donaldson has gotten her to do some terrible things. She feels personally responsible for it. Maybe she feels personally responsible for Wilson's family's death. She literally feels like she has blood on her hands. And if she were to tell the person that she loved why she doesn't want to be with him, it makes it real. Like to say to another human, I'm terrible. It's my fault these people are killed. That makes it real. It's one thing to like feel that in your head, and it's another
Right.
thing to tell somebody. So a defense mechanism can be to push them away, to be rude to them, which is how we see her be.
Right.
So I don't know which way to go. Like, was she purposefully pushing him away because she didn't want to honestly, like, be honest about the monster that she's been? And that's like a defense mechanism? Or does she not necessarily want to be with him and she's being manipulative, and it's not until she wants what she wants that she's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I am sorry. It was so hard leaving you on that train. It was the hardest thing I've ever dealt with." Like, this show does like to be ambiguous, and I do feel like they're
Yes.
they're giving you options here. I don't know where I fall on that.
Okay. Yeah. Now that you say that, I do feel like she is a little bit. And maybe she's manipulative, not necessarily for any particular reason of like she hates Ian. Like maybe she really truly does care about Ian. But I think she is at least manipulative about her and deals and like how she's surviving deals. Like I think one of the things that she doesn't want Milner to know that they have Carvel is because she thinks that he can cure deals. And if Milner gets a hold of him, we're never going to see Carvel again and she'll never get her deals cured. So that's
Right.
why I believe like I think her manipulation doesn't necessarily come from that she has like a red ledger. Like I do feel like we will see that she has a red ledger, but I don't think that's where it comes from. I think it's more of that she's worried about her life with deals. So she's very selfish in that like I'm only concerned about living, which, being faced with your mortality is understandable of why you would try to get people to do things, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. So I'm curious, we're with this scene we're in the literal storm. Like the weather has been getting worse this entire time, and we are finally at a point where it's actually it is literally storming. And I did kind of wonder whether or not that is in any way a metaphor. If so, what is the storm a metaphor for? And is it possible that the storm is going to go get worse? Or is what it's built to right here is that the storm, like this combination of events?
I think the storm is going to get worse. I think, okay, so we saw another part with the storm when we first see the storm, even before we see it with Becky and Ian and them. We see it with Dugdale and that scientist who she stumbles upon
Oh
the
man, that was
vaccine.
so awkward.
Yeah, and she just absolutely, you can tell this girl loves Dugdale. She just admires him, loves him, thinks
And I
he's
think
great.
he really likes her.
Now,
This is
see,
somebody that can geek out with.
I don't know if
She's
it's
a
love.
geek. She
Well,
has a
but he's not a
home.
geek. He's not necessarily a geek. He's just a businessman. He was just a top guy, and I think he's sad
Okay.
and lonely. I think it was more like
Okay.
when he looks at her, it's because his wife left him. Nobody's given him
Yeah.
any attention. He didn't think that there could be a life outside of this. So I think not necessarily he loves her, because this is the question I have about Dugdale.
Yeah.
Did he call those guys on her?
I think so.
So if he truly loved her, why would he call him on her? He has been trying to go against the network from the beginning. He even went behind the
Okay.
scenes with her and was like writing it down like, "Hey, don't do this." He goes with her to her house. He
I think he
leaves.
was I think he was trying to protect her and like seeing how far has she taken this? Has she taken it not far enough that I can like rein it in without anybody knowing? And then once it got and every time he tried to rein it in, he found out that she was a bit farther. So it's like the first time he tried to rein it, he's like, "Don't ask any more questions." And she's like, "I don't need to. I already have answers. Look, this is this other thing, and that's not like that is literally impossible." And that's when he like writes it down of like, "Meet me
Yeah, yeah.
outside." And he meets her outside, and he's like, "You gotta stop. You gotta stop."
She's
So I
like, "I
think
have
he
a home
thinks he can
lab."
like that's exactly like he thinks he can stop it there. And she's like, "No, I have a home lab and I have a sample." It's
Yes.
like, no, you can't have a sample at your house. This is not okay.
So that was my question. If he called those guys on her, or if they had gotten to a point where she had gone too far and he was just waiting outside to see if they would come get her. But I do feel like
Yeah.
he called her. I feel like he called them in on her.
And I think because the way he said like he first said something like I'm sorry for you and then like explained it a little bit and like went into a little bit more oh I mean I'm sorry that whatever like it definitely sounded like he actually said what he meant first of like I'm sorry that it basically I'm sorry you're gonna have to die and then kind of corrected himself and was like, I'm sorry you're caught up in the, you know? I don't remember exactly how it went, but it definitely felt like he was a little bit too honest, and then he tried to like backtrack and sound not quite as honest about what he was saying.
But
Um,
not to get too distracted from your storm comment, but we did see, that kind of where the storm was brewing. We saw the storm fall there. I don't feel like anything happened dramatically to the characters to say that the storm hit. I think that that's why it was such a light storm that we saw, is because it is the beginning of the storm. And I think the next episode we're going to get heavy storm, maybe the calm before the storm, and then a finishing of the storm. Or the eye of the
and
storm.
just yeah, yeah. I did think that there's like the they're pretty close to the worst part, where that basically like a bomb of a virus is about to be released. Like this
Yes.
is going to be devastating on the world. And this we actually see this kind of in the US version where the goal is to make people just like beg for the vaccine,
Right.
where this is so terrible that people will just desperately want it. So I do feel like they're about as close as they can get to a bad storm.
Oh, yeah.
They may not necessarily be there, but they are right. It it definitely seems like they've finally seen they finally gotten the weather report for a hurricane or a tornado or something along those lines. But I like that touch of like every time you saw the weather, like you could see it getting kind of a little bit worse. So I thought that was kind of an interesting touch.
Before we
I have,
before we leave
please.
the weather, when we saw, so we talk about your drawings and the weather that was very upsetting to you.
Yep.
I just have one thing about the drawings that I saw that relates back to our very first episode of this season. I had talked
Okay.
about when Milner met Carvel and was talking to him on the red couch. There was the red dress, she has the red hair, and I explained the temptation that she gave him. On the one picture that we saw him drawing, it said temptation, the first temptation, suicide. Those were the three things that were written on that one of him as the doctor. And to me, it just felt like what he was writing about was that like he had this idea for Janus before he met her. He knew it was never gonna go anywhere. He had the grand idea of like what could be, like he is on the side of malaria, and there was that first temptation from Milner that set that was the catalyst of this whole event.
It's interesting you say that because I definitely would not have said anything close to that. When you frame it that way, I remember Milner called him on his BS, where she said, "Okay, well, if we're the problem, let's get rid of ourselves." And she steps onto the banister and she gets ready to commit suicide of, you know, let put your money where your mouth is. If we're the problem,
The first
let's
temptation.
let's eliminate us. And then he's like, no. That's not the solution. It's not we kill ourselves. And that allowed him to open himself up to like there is a better solution than just mass murder. Like, what if we can do this?
And
That's I still don't know if I believe that because it is a picture of him with a child, and the take I took on this was that I think it's like post first things he did to Arby
okay.
and wondering if he took it too far and if he can fix this or if it's just like do I just commit suicide at this point? Like If I'm
And that's what's great
continuing to
about this show.
do
We can both take different things from it. Because when I read that, I was like, first thing I thought about was him and Milner's interaction of the first
yeah,
temptation, and that suicide thing is right before that I was talking about when the
right before.
temptation happened with the red couch, the red dress, the red hair. So I don't
I
know,
think Max has some thoughts on this.
Max.
Max is saying, Max,
No,
who do you agree with?
no, you know nothing, Max.
Max,
You don't know
Max,
anything.
tell the audience you agree with me.
You don't know anything, Max. Get out of here.
Say it in English, Max.
Sterling! Shut up, Max! Shut your mouth! You betrayed her!
You betrayed her.
You
I
betrayed
think
her!
that's English. I think that is
I
definitely
speak good
good English.
English!
Okay. I've got two small things left.
Yes.
The last one being a question, but the first one is: did you notice the song that was playing when Jessica Hyde pulled herself out of the hazmat truck, and did you have any kind of thoughts on that?
I did. It stuck out to me. The guy he was sitting in his car. It was diegetic music, which was actually being played on his radio. And I forgot what the song was, but I feel like it was in relation to freeing a bird or something.
For anybody in the audience who doesn't know what diegetic music is, please, why don't you let them know?
So diegetic music is music that is being played in universe. So if you think of Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill's Walkman, all of those songs that he listens to are on his Walkman. Like they are in universe. Where, and I forget the other
Or it's
term.
being played on the ship, or it's like, and
Yes.
I think in volume two, I think all of the music is diegetic. Like it's when somebody's listening to the radio on the car, that's the
Mm-hmm.
music we're hearing. Quill
Yes.
is listening to the music in his headphones, or somebody is, and yes, it sometimes is being extrapolated a little bit. Like we see what one person is listening to something in headphones, but we're seeing something from a kind of a third person perspective, and it's lining up with that. So it may not be like this character hears it, but still it is
In
definitely happening
universe.
in universe. Yeah.
Another great one, Baby
Um,
Driver. He's listening to all those songs.
yes. Oh, Baby Driver's a killer one. And it made me appreciate some music that I don't think I was quite even necessarily interested with. Like that first song was one I don't think was one I would have listened to, and it's such a
It's
good
killer.
opening.
That's killer.
Similar, so I'll try and stay
Okay.
short on this
No, no,
diatribe, but
no.
it's
Take your
tough.
time. Go ahead.
It's tough. Peacemaker. I never thought I would have cared about hair metal. And man, did he choose a genre of music that I think a lot of people don't necessarily have an attachment to, and put enough love and effort into choosing what went in there and how it properly fit in with the scenes that it worked. And it wasn't just the theme song, which I ended up loving so much,
Yes.
but the use of other songs throughout really had an impact, and it really felt like it came from a place of love and good solid choice, versus like, yeah.
So what you're saying is James Gunn is great at putting music in his works of art. You're right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but
Okay.
continue about
Apparently, quite a hot take here. I might have pissed off a lot of the audience. They might have like turned off YouTube at this point, thrown their phones in the toilet because this is such a hot take I have here that James Gunn is really good with putting music in his media. Okay,
Okay.
okay. That's
I
that's fair. That's fair. Okay,
sorry
so
sorry to derail
uh
you. Please tell me about the song.
no, that's fair. I thought it was an interesting choice. I don't know the band. It's a band called Snowy White. The song is a song called Bird of Paradise, and it's got some pretty interesting lyrics. I think we only hear the chorus where it says, "My bird of paradise, sweet bird of paradise." But if you look at the different verses, One of them says, "Saw you flying by, flash of turquoise blue. I just had to try to keep your life in view." So it seems like somebody looking at this bird from a distance, kind of longingly. The next verse says, "Wish that I could fly. I'd be beside you now, but I can only sigh and watch you circle round." So we're kind of seeing more of that. And then it says, "So you fly away. When will you come again so I can watch you play in the pouring rain?" So, one, I think it's great choice that they could end on a song that ends in rain when that's
Yeah.
how the episode ends. But also, I kind of feel like she is the bird of paradise, and I feel like she might be the bird of paradise for Milner. You
Oh,
know that Milner has this kind of longing of this the last connection she has to Carvel.
yes. Interesting. And so the one thing I noticed about that song, I noticed they were playing thing. I know that it had to do with Jessica Hyde, and the UK version hasn't really had music outside of their main theme, or
Yes.
like the theme that builds tension. So I thought that it was a very specific choice that they chose that song when when she was escaping.
Yeah.
Huh.
So the song apparently came out in 1980. I I'm not aware of it being a big hit in the US. I don't know if it was a bigger hit in the UK, and it kind of hit for certain people. It's a little bit of it feels like a little bit of a deep cut where it's like you've got to do some homework or you've got to be one of the few people that kind of knows because
Right.
you don't actually get the lyrics of the chorus in there, which I thought would have been more interesting because I feel like there's depth there. And maybe it was chosen for that, but like you know that this show it has pretty short cuts. So there isn't time in most scenes for verse after verse.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe that was their intention and they just didn't have time for it. I feel like there's more to it.
Oh yeah.
And it would have been interesting for more people if they could have really appreciated that rather than having to have some nerd go through and Google like what is I had to put it on one screen and then like have my phone playing like what is this song and then look up the lyrics of that because the lyrics aren't in there and then like what is the meaning of this and interesting, but it requires a little bit of homework. It would have been interesting if there was a little bit more payoff of like giving you more information in the scene that you can use and not require you to go home and do homework on your phone.
Right. Because
One last,
I was the person that didn't do the homework. I heard it. I felt it was important. I heard things and I was kind of like, I feel like this is representative of Jessica Hyde. But that was all I took from it. I didn't do the homework. You did the homework. Thanks
you
for.
shouldn't have to do homework. This shouldn't be a game of Trivial Pursuit where
I like
only the
Trivial Pursuit.
person who has the worst love life because they're spending the most amount of their time, researching stuff rather than making meaningful relationships. Like that seems like a race to the bottom, you know?
Ah, that's
So you
fair.
shouldn't have to have that. It would have been nice if they could have included a little bit more that makes you want to, like one of the verses. Because I don't feel like the chorus gave enough, other than it did feel like I could see her being a songbird or
Yeah.
a bird of paradise. I could see her being a bird of paradise,
Yeah. And she was
but
a
it
bird in a cage, and then she
she's a
got
bird.
out,
Yeah,
and then she got out of the cage. She was leaving the cage at that moment, so
yeah.
I could see her being a bird figure.
But it would have been nice if they'd given just a little bit more to work with, you know?
Yes.
But still, I thought that was a really kind of cool choice, and I thought it fit in very well. And I have one last question.
Lay it on me.
And that last question is Arby, triple or quadruple crossing? And or what's his end game?
So I was thrown for a loop, and there was some really great storytelling here because we saw Lee after he goes to the house with the dolls that they had left. He sees a chocolate covered raisin on the floor and he says a breadcrumb. And in my mind, at first, I was like, wow, he carelessly dropped a raisin on the floor and now they're going to find him. And Lee looked at it as a breadcrumb that he found, but now it seems like he put that breadcrumb there intentionally. He left, like, Arby is very good at what he does, he's very intentional. So the fact that he would leave a chocolate covered raisin for Lee to find, and then there was the payoff for it. And the build up before when he threatens the kid that's the hacker and he's like, can you do passports? Can you do birth certificates? It The way they frame it makes it look like Arby is trying to get these passports for Ian, Becky, Grant, Donaldson, I guess, maybe.
The odd thing, which I didn't pick up until the second watch through, is he said three.
Arby, him, or the girl and the young girl.
Yep.
See, I
That
missed the
I didn't
three.
even. Now, who knows? Maybe he wasn't including Donaldson because it's like screw Donaldson.
Right.
No, they need to protect Donaldson for right now. That seems like a weird family. I think they were making it clear that it was like, but it's just one tiny detail that's easy to miss. That
And I
it really
did.
wasn't until my second time through that I caught that, and it's like, ooh, that is a very specific amount that definitely doesn't equal RB, Becky, Ian, Anton, Donaldson,
And Grant.
and Grant. I forgot. Yeah, yeah. It that definitely doesn't match this group.
See, when I I may have heard the three, and the first three that in my mind would have been Becky, Ian, Grant. Arby doesn't need
Right.
one. Anton, they don't care
Eh,
about. Donaldson, but the fact that there's six of them, I thought he was doing it for them. Now I realize he was doing it for them. So
and when he was talking to Lee, he said, he was basically like, "I'll give you these people. You leave," and I don't remember the two women's name, but he's like, "You leave so and so and so and so." Basically, like the woman and the girl out of it.
Amanda and
we
Tess.
have we have identities, so like he's going to be able to disappear after all of this with those two. So what is his end game? Is he crossing the gang, or is he potentially letting the network think he's crossing them, and he's using that as like a chess move to further double cross them, or like what is going on?
I truly think that it is a double cross. So I think that, he makes it seem like he is trying to screw over the original group. But I think that it was a way, like, he got what he wanted. He got the passports, he got the birth certificates, he basically got all the information. He could have just disappeared and didn't have to give them anything. So he could have taken those two and just left because he had it all. And if the network can't find them based off this, like they couldn't find, well, I mean they could find the gang in the original one, but the fact that he told him that makes me think that he is trying to get Lee to let his guard down a little bit so that he thinks that he's just going to get that group and then he's going to make a move on Lee.
Right. I think it was very telling when he said something that Jessica Hyde said a long time ago, which he said, "There are no sides, just people who help you and people who don't." So I don't think he's on Milner's side. I don't think he's on the gang side. It's possible that he still has one more trick to help them out, for some reason, maybe because they can help him out. But I do think he is in it for him
Yes.
and the two people that have formed his new family. Like I said, whether or not any last tricks come out, I don't think it's because he's on somebody's side.
That's fair. I did like earlier in the callback in the beginning of the episode, he said, "Where is Jessica Hyde?" He said it perfectly spot on. Where is Jessica Hyde? I did like that little callback. That was great. Now,
Perfect timing. Well done. Yeah.
here's my question to you. Is Wilson going to interact with the friend group, the gang? And what is that going to look like?
I don't know what it's going to look like, but they've got to have a confrontation. They at this point where Wilson is all in on the master plan. Before he was wrestling with it. I think it'll be interesting to see he's committed to it and he still likes his friends and he doesn't want Lee to hurt them,
He wants to save his friends.
but he is committed to the master plan. So I think we do need to it would be nice to see some kind of interaction there.
Do you think the group will see him become the next Mr. Rabbit? If
I
that
don't
happens.
think so. I think he will become the next Mr. Rabbit, and it will be, like maybe they feel like they've defeated the situation, and we as an audience will find out that it's like, no, it actually can live on through him. He'll have to do some work to regrow it, but the potential of that evil or greater good, however you want to look at it, is still there. And I think it would be more interesting if the group doesn't know about that.
I agree. I think that would be the smart decision.
All right, we have had some predictions pay off. We've had some predictions not pay off.
We
If
have new
you want to,
predictions.
we have new predictions. If you want to see where these are going to go, we always release episodes on Mondays, so please check us out. If you haven't already, we would love a sub to the channel. Thumbs up is always nice. Hitting that notification bell, that way you get notifications about when our new episodes come out. We also do shorts, so please check out our channel to see some of our interesting shorts. They are not all Utopia related. And as always, I'm Sterling. This is Mark. It's been a real pleasure having you with us, and we hope to see you next week.
Thanks for stopping by, guys.